The city never truly sleeps. Towering skyscrapers shine like beacons against the midnight sky, their lights reflecting on the wet pavement below. The streets hum with life, people laughing, car horns blaring, the distant thud of bass from exclusive clubs. But beneath the surface of this dazzling metropolis lurks a far darker world. This city belongs to men like Don Vincenzo, a mafia kingpin who controls everything from underground casinos to high-profile political deals. His empire thrives on fear, and those who dare to challenge his authority disappear without a trace. His influence stretches into the police force, the courts, and even the business elite. He believes himself to be untouchable, a god among mortals. But tonight, fate sets something into motion that will shake his empire to its core. Emma Carter is the kind of woman who commands respect without raising her voice. Smart, resourceful, and fiercely independent. She's built a name for herself in the corporate world. But beneath her composed demeanor lies a fire that few get to see. She has spent years supporting her husband's military career, standing by him through every deployment, every sleepless night of uncertainty. She knows what it means to be strong. Her husband, Jake Carter, is a different kind of strong, a decorated Marine. Jake has spent years in the most dangerous war zones on Earth. His name alone is whispered with reverence among the ranks. He's the kind of man who turns the tide of a battle single-handedly. His body is a map of old scars, each one telling a story of survival, of missions that pushed him to the edge. But war hasn't hardened him. If anything, it's made him more focused, more disciplined, and the one thing he values above all else, his wife. Then there's Don Vincenzo, a man who believes power is eternal. He has ruled this city's underworld for decades, crushing rivals with calculated ruthlessness. To him, people are merely assets, useful until they aren't. His empire is built on control. And tonight, he's about to make a mistake that will cost him everything. His trusted men, Luca and Marco, are his enforcers, loyal to a fault and eager to prove themselves. They carry out the Don's will without question, believing themselves untouchable. They think they've kidnapped just another high-value target, someone who will bring them a hefty ransom. They have no idea they've just signed their own death warrant. It all starts with a misunderstanding. Emma Carter, through sheer coincidence, finds herself tangled in a high-stakes business deal that interferes with one of the Mafia's money-laundering operations. She isn't even aware of the connection. Her only crime is being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Emma Carter never imagined that signing a simple business contract could put her life in danger. She wasn't a corporate shark or a power-hungry investor. She was just a smart, hard-working woman with an eye for business. A real estate deal had come across her desk, an old commercial property downtown that had been tied up in legal battles for years. When the opportunity arose to acquire it for her company, she jumped on it without hesitation. It was a golden opportunity, a career-making move. What Emma didn't know, however, was that the property had been a front for a major mafia money-laundering operation. For years, Don Vincenzo and his organization had used the building to clean their dirty money, shell businesses, fake transactions, and offshore accounts all funneled through that single location. On paper, the place looked like a struggling chain of laundromats and storage facilities, but in reality, it was one of the biggest financial hubs for organized crime in the city. The problem: Emma's company had unknowingly disrupted their operation by taking ownership of the property. To her, it was just another real estate acquisition. But to the Mafia, it was an act of war. The moment the deal went through, Mafia accountants noticed a problem. The money flow stopped. Transactions that had once been routine were flagged. Offshore accounts froze because the official ownership had changed. It didn't take long before Don Vincenzo got the news. "A woman," he sneered, flipping through the file his men had compiled on Emma Carter. She had no criminal record, no history with law enforcement, no known connections to any rival organizations. Just a businesswoman. She's either very stupid or very brave. But then came the twist that sealed Emma's fate. She hadn't just taken the property. She had filed an audit into its financial records. It was standard procedure for any new acquisition, but to the Mafia, it was a direct threat. If she dug too deep, she might expose years of carefully hidden transactions. Don Vincenzo couldn't allow that. She had to be silenced. And so, the order was given. Take her. Make her disappear. What the Mafia didn't realize was that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because Emma Carter wasn't just anybody. She was the wife of the deadliest Marine the U.S. military had ever produced. And he was about to rain hell down upon them. To Don Vincenzo, however, she becomes an obstacle, and in his world, obstacles are meant to be removed. He doesn't see this as a complex problem. His men suggest a simple solution. Take her, use her as leverage, and force her business partners into compliance. It's worked 100 times before. No one fights back against the Mafia. So, in the heart of the city, in broad daylight, Emma Carter is taken. It happens so quickly that by the time people realize what's going on, she's already in a black SUV speeding toward an unknown destination. No witnesses will talk. No police will investigate. But the Mafia doesn't know who they've taken. They don't know that Emma's husband is not just another civilian. They don't know that they have just declared war on the deadliest Marine the U.S. military has ever produced. The first thing Jake notices when he steps into his house is the silence. The second thing is the overturned chair in the living room. Jake's instincts, honed through years of combat, immediately kick in. He moves with precision, scanning the room, noting every sign of struggle, the broken lamp, the scattered papers, the faint smell of expensive cologne that doesn't belong to either of them. Then his phone buzzes. He answers, his voice calm. "Who is this?" A deep chuckle on the other end. Then a voice, smooth and confident. "Don Vincenzo, we have your wife." The words settle like ice in Jake's veins. Play nice, and maybe she lives. Silence. Most men would panic, beg, offer money. Jake does none of those things. Instead, his grip tightens around the phone. His pulse slows. His breathing steady. The predator inside him, the one he kept buried after leaving the battlefield, awakens. Don Vincenzo expects fear. Instead, he gets something far more terrifying. You have no idea what you've just done. The storm is coming, and the Mafia has no idea who they've just provoked. Jake Carter has always been a man of discipline, but now that discipline turns into an unrelenting storm of vengeance. The first thing he does is call in old favors. He reaches out to his military contacts, men who owe him their lives. men who have spent years in the shadows doing the government's dirty work. Within hours, he has eyes on the streets, former intelligence operatives, black ops specialists, and even underground informants feeding him information. The Mafia thinks they own this city, but Jake knows something they don't. Every empire has cracks, and he is going to find them. He scours surveillance footage, hacking into traffic cameras and club security feeds, tracking the vehicle that took Emma. His methods are cold, calculated. He moves through the underworld like a ghost, piecing together a trail that leads straight to Don Vincenzo's empire. With every clue he finds, memories of past missions resurface, missions where he turned the tide of battle single-handedly, where he eliminated high-value targets with nothing but his mind and his blade. The same skills that made him a legend on the battlefield are now fueling his personal war. And the Mafia? They have no idea they are being hunted. Emma Carter refuses to be a helpless victim. She studies her captors from the moment she is thrown into a dimly lit warehouse. Their habits, their routines, their weaknesses. Every interaction is a piece of a puzzle, and she is assembling it faster than they realize. She learns that Luca and Marco, the Don's enforcers, are not as unified as they pretend to be. Luca is the dominant one, ruthless and impatient. Marco, though brutal, is insecure, always seeking approval. She senses tension between them. That's something she can use. She also pays close attention to the layout of the warehouse, which doors creak, which guards are the least attentive, how often they switch shifts. Then, she makes her move. Using a discarded piece of wire, she picks the lock on her restraints and slips into the shadows. Her heart pounds as she edges toward an exit. She's so close to freedom, but then a gun cocks behind her. Luca's voice is laced with amusement. Clever girl. Her escape attempt fails, and the punishment is swift. She is bound more tightly, her face bruised from a vicious backhand, but she has left behind a clue, a small piece of fabric tied around a door handle. Barely noticeable, but Jake will notice, and when he does, hell will follow. Jake doesn't just hunt, he dismantles. His first stop is a Mafia-run bar where low-level thugs gather. He walks in alone, his presence like a storm rolling in. The moment he steps through the doors, every pair of eyes locks onto him, sensing something is off. He doesn't waste time. Within seconds, the place erupts into chaos, broken jaws, shattered bottles, bones snapping like dry twigs. The men who laughed minutes ago now beg for mercy. Jake grabs one survivor by the throat and slams him against the wall. His voice is calm, emotionless. Where is she? The thug stammers, but one look into Jake's unwavering eyes, and he spills everything. From there, Jake moves like a ghost through the city, hitting Mafia stash houses, smuggling dens, and gambling rings. Each time, he leaves behind one survivor, spreading a message, "Tell your boss, I'm coming." The Mafia begins to panic. They thought they had the upper hand. Now, they realize they have kidnapped the wrong woman. Don Vincenzo watches the chaos unfold with growing fury. His men are disappearing, his operations being burned to the ground, and his enforcers, Luca and Marco, are terrified. He knows Jake Carter won't stop, so he decides to set a trap. Through his network of corrupt cops, He lures Jake to an exclusive nightclub, pretending Emma is being held there. He fills the place with armed men, ready to end this war before it begins. But they underestimate him. When Jake walks into the club, he isn't the one caught in a trap. They are. The moment the first gun is raised, Jake moves like lightning. The air fills with gunfire and screams. Bodies drop one by one, each shot placed with lethal precision. He weaves through the chaos, breaking bones, dodging bullets, using the club's neon-lit interior as his personal battlefield. By the time the gunfire stops, Jake is the only one left standing. Luca and Marco, watching from the shadows, realize the truth. They are not hunting a man. They are being hunted by a monster. Jake stands over a battered Mafia lieutenant, bloodied and trembling. The man coughs, gasping for air as Jake applies just enough pressure to keep him conscious. "Where is she?" Jake's voice is low, dangerous. The lieutenant spits out the answer between ragged breaths. "The compound, north of the city. You won't make it out alive." Jake doesn't respond. He already knows that only one side is walking away from this. The Mafia, sensing their impending doom, fortifies their secluded estate, a heavily guarded fortress deep in the countryside. Armed men patrol the perimeter, their eyes scanning the dark woods. Inside, Don Vincenzo stands surrounded by his remaining lieutenants, barking orders. "He's coming. We end this tonight." They prepare for war. But they don't realize Jake isn't walking into their trap. They're walking into his. Jake doesn't storm the compound. He infiltrates it, like a ghost in the night. He moves through the shadows, using his military training to eliminate guards one by one. Silent kills, swift strikes. Each body that drops spreads more fear among the ranks. He disables security feeds, setting traps that cause explosions in different areas, distractions that send guards running in the wrong direction. The Mafia expected a frontal assault. Instead, they're dealing with an unseen enemy. The compound becomes a battlefield of Jake's design. Guards panic as bullets fly from the darkness, taking out sentries before they can react. Smoke grenades flood the hallways. Explosions rock the outer defenses. Jake moves through the chaos, his gun never missing its mark. One after another, the Mafia's best fall. He reloads, advances, reloads again. To the Mafia, it feels like a nightmare with no end. To Jake, it's just another mission. Inside, Emma senses the shift. The once confident guards now pace the halls, whispering nervously. The compound is under attack, and she knows exactly who is behind it. Using everything she's observed, Emma makes her move. She fakes an injury, luring in one of her captors. The moment he comes close, she strikes. A broken chair leg becomes a weapon, slamming into his throat. She grabs his knife, making her way through the corridors, taking out guards when necessary. The chaos outside is her opportunity. And then she sees him. Through the smoke and flashing emergency lights, Jake emerges, a rifle in hand, his face streaked with sweat and blood. Their eyes meet for the briefest moment, but there's no time for words. A hail of bullets forces them into cover. Side by side, they fight back, a husband and wife duo ripping through the remnants of the Mafia like an unstoppable force. Luca and Marco make a desperate last stand, but they never stood a chance. The Carter storm wipes them out. And now, only one remains. The once mighty Mafia boss sits in his grand office, his empire reduced to rubble around him. The doors burst open. Jake walks in. Vincenzo raises his hands, forcing a smirk. "We can talk. You're a reasonable man." Jake's gun doesn't waver. He's past reason. Vincenzo tries to plead, tries to bargain his way out. But Jake has only one response. A single bullet. Vincenzo slumps over his desk. His reign over. Silence. The Mafia is finished. Jake turns to Emma, pulling her into his arms. It's over. But the legend of what happened here tonight, that will never die. The night air is thick with smoke as flames engulf the compound behind them. Emma and Jake move swiftly, disappearing into the cover of the surrounding forest. Every muscle in Jake's body is wired for another fight. But for now, the battlefield is behind them. They've won. As they reach a safe distance, the distant wail of sirens cuts through the silence. Law enforcement arrives, too late to stop the carnage, just in time to clean up the wreckage. The remnants of Don Vincenzo's empire are either dead or in cuffs. Jake and Emma watch from the shadows as officers flood the burning ruins, rounding up the survivors. The Mafia is finished. But they both know this isn't the end. With one last glance at the destruction they left behind, they disappear into the night. The drive home is silent. Emma grips Jake's hand tightly, still processing everything. She's alive. They made it. Jake, ever the soldier, keeps his focus forward, his mind racing through the events of the past few days. His past caught up to them, but they survived. As they step inside their home, the weight of the ordeal finally settles. Emma collapses onto the couch, exhaling. "We should probably talk about what just happened." Jake leans against the doorway, his gaze unreadable. "There's nothing to talk about." Emma frowns. "Jake, we can't just pretend this didn't happen." He knows she's right. For years, he thought he had left war behind, that his skills were buried in the past. But the moment they took Emma, something inside him switched back on. "I'll always fight for you," he finally says. "No matter what." Emma reaches for his hand. "And I'll always fight with you." A quiet understanding settles between them. They aren't just a couple. They're a force to be reckoned with. Days pass. The city moves on, oblivious to the war that was fought in the shadows. Jake and Emma find themselves settling back into normal life, or at least, as normal as things can be. But Jake never truly relaxes. His instincts keep him on edge. One night, as he stands on their balcony, staring into the dark skyline, Emma joins him. "Can you ever really leave it all behind?" she asks softly. He exhales, shaking his head. "No, and I don't think it's over." Emma gives him a questioning look. But before he can explain, his phone buzzes. A single, anonymous message. "You thought this was finished? You were wrong." Jake's grip tightens around the phone. Emma reads over his shoulder, eyes narrowing. No words need to be spoken. They both know exactly what this means. This fight isn't over. It's only just beginning. The city may have returned to normal, but in the underworld, the storm is far from over. In a dimly lit, Hidden location. The remnants of Don Vincenzo's empire regroup. A handful of survivors, bruised, battered, but not broken, sit around a large table. The air is thick with rage and desperation. Luca, his face still swollen from his last encounter with Jake, slams his fist down. We underestimated him. We won't make that mistake again. Marco exhales, shaking his head. Don Vincenzo is dead. His empire is gone. What's left to fight for? A new voice enters the conversation. Deep, calm, dangerous. Revenge. A tall figure steps from the shadows, his presence commanding instant respect. His face is barely visible under the dim light, but the cold steel in his eyes sends chills down the spines of every man in the room. He's not a survivor of the Mafia. He's something worse. A mercenary, a hunter, and now he has his sights set on Jake Carter. One man tore apart an entire organization. That makes him interesting. The figure leans forward, a smirk playing at his lips. I want to see what happens when he finally meets a real challenge. Luca glances at Marco. He knows exactly what this means. Jake Carter may have won the battle, but a war is coming, and this time, he won't be the only predator in the fight.